His name was like a warning. His crimes, brutal, inexcusable. One human being who took everything from another and left scars that would never heal. For his victim, Christy Mack, justice was simply survival. For him, justice is a cell, a locked door, a life confined. Some wounds heal, others never do. And some men end up exactly where they belong. This is War Machine. Welcome to Deeper Into the Cage.
What's up, my friends? My name is Robin Black, and I am a martial artist, and I am the creative consultant for Dark Side of the Cage Season 1. I usually start kind of excited, but it's a little dark today in here. This episode of Deeper Into the Cage, we're going to look at War Machine. It is episode 10 of Dark Side of the Cage. You can find it on Vice. Maybe it's the darkest one. If you know War Machine's story, you know why. Today we are going to speak to Tim Healy, who is the executive producer of Dark Side of the Cage, and I'm going to talk to Dave Hodgson, who is the supervising producer of Dark Side of the Cage. We're going to talk about our favorite moments of the season. That I'm getting a little more lit up. This will be much less dark, I hope. We'll talk about our favorite moments of the season, and we'll talk about if there is a season 2. I'm going to take some audience suggestions. We're going to chat about what could be some possible topics for if there is one day, a season 2 of Dark Side of the Cage. Who could we do it on? We want to hear your ideas as well. First, let's look at this trailer for episode 10, Dark Side of the Cage, War Machine.
He was a savage.
He was arrogant.
He was a killer.
John embraced the role of War Machine.
In MMA, we don't prevent people from getting to this point.
Maybe I could have done something. I don't know. He had all the potential in the world.
And then, boom. I got a phone call. John said I got arrested last night.
He's exactly where he belongs.
I hate the person that I was. I deserve prison, and I deserve hell even more.
Dark Side of the Cage, season finale, Wednesday at 10 on Vice.
Okay, my friends, this is the War Machine episode. So remember, this is a podcast where I talk about the episode of Dark Side of the Cage that is available, of course, on Vice. And this one is it's a dark one for sure. There's a victim. There's a clear victim here, and she was, seriously traumatized, hurt physically, probably emotionally. There's a clear victim here. And that's undeniable. And even when you hear War Machine speak in the episode, and he does speak in the episode, you won't cut him any slack. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. When you share these stories, you certainly aren't, the human bias of the people working on it, somewhere in the back of our minds, I think there's a natural fear. I hope we are not involved with somehow diminishing what this guy did. And that I'm happy to report that doesn't happen in this episode. These are difficult stories to tell. It's part of the beauty of the challenge of it, but they're hard stories to tell. He victimized somebody very clearly. Matt Serra is in the episode, and Matt Serra is, as dark as War Machine is, Matt Serra's all light. Everybody loves Matt Serra. He's a brilliant martial artist and just a beloved guy. And I was really happy that he would talk about War Machine because, one, he's fearless, and two, he is beyond reproach. So he's a perfect person to be able to talk about it. But Matt Serra also spoke about War Machine and being a guest on Dark Side of the Cage when he was speaking to Joe Rogan. And actually, Chase, just put it in here. It's just a short clip. It's Matt Serra talking about being a guest on Dark Side of the Cage to speak about War Machine.
Today, I just did a camera crew from Toronto came down. They're doing a thing called Dark Side of the Cage, and they want to interview me about War Machine. and they came out, and I did a thing for that, and it just depressed me. It just brought me down, because that was a kid. Did you know him?
I had him on the podcast.
That's right. When he was on the show, there's some guys that are just evil, and there's other guys that I think that if they had the right people around them, they could have made different choices.
What's fascinating there, and these are things that a lot of people won't allow themselves to try to be empathetic about, but life is a path, right? Life is a path. We are shaped by our life experiences, the things that we're taught from our parents, from the world around us, the things that happen to us. We are not, I have a child, and she is not a fully formed thing, and neither are you, and neither am I, and I'm in my 50s. We become what we're going to become as affected by the environment and the world around us. And Matt references that. And in his opinion, from seeing this man, and then seeing him at one point in his life, and then seeing him be a horrible victimizer, Matt very, very astutely observes that under different circumstances, we could all be different people. And when you bring up something like this is not in any way trying to make an excuse for any of the things that any of us do. We have to take responsibility for the things we do. That man did horrible things. He's in prison. And he will be for a long time, and he should be for a long time. But yeah, I found that really interesting, that Matt Serra was capable of seeing that and then sharing that. But yeah, it's a very complicated episode, and yeah, it's a little darker. It's a little bit darker for sure. And I hope that Christy Mack is okay. And that the next chapters of her life become better and better and better. To wrap, I want to bring in two of the people that were executives and really played a huge part in making this entire series. My friend Tim Healy, who is the executive producer of the series. He's from Rail Splitter Pictures. And Dave Hodgson, who is the series producer or the supervising producer. And the three of us are going to share our favorite moments of the season, the most interesting stuff. We're going to have a laugh, and we're going to look ahead. If there's a season 2, what are some of the episodes and topics that the audience has said they'd like to hear, and what do we think of them? Let's bring them in. Tim and Dave, let's do this. Who are you and what do you do?
My name's Tim Healy. I'm the co-owner of a production company called Rail Splitter Pictures here on the East Coast of the United States. And yeah, we do all different types of programming, but we do Dark Side of the 90s for Vice, and Cage kind of grew out of that series.
And Dave, who are you? What do you do?
Put on the spot here. I'm the supervising producer for Dark Side of the Cage. So yeah, proud to have worked on this show from, the very seedling of it as a kind of an idea, and what could this be, and who could we feature in some of these episodes, through to, now post-production and watching these for the final time before they hit the airwaves. So everything from soup to nuts, kind of.
Dave, I sat with you early, and we were talking about episodes that we'd want to do. Do you remember some that we talked about that we didn't do? And Tim, same question after Dave. Some that were in the orbit that we haven't done?
I mean, there's such a long list of episodes that we haven't done that I would like to, and part of what I've been doing is, especially after the show's been announced and you see people suggesting what their kind of dream episodes would be, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But, I've got a list of probably 70 to 80 ideas from, this is one we definitely have to do, to, ones that I haven't really fully looked into. But, I remember sitting with you and talking about an episode like Evan Tanner, and you just kind of taking a drink of your coffee and nodding slowly and being like, yep, that's got to be an episode. So, that was kind of the low-hanging fruit. And, yeah, even something I know like our two-parter on Pride, that isn't one that was in kind of the initial episodes, but Tim, you advocated pretty strongly for, and particularly that it should be a two-parter, and I'm so glad that was the case.
Yeah, I think I'm really happy that they agreed to do that. Vice listened to us, and they listened to our appeal, But we kind of feel like it was really important to tell not only just the rise of Pride, but also kind of its decline and kind of what led to its downfall. So that's a really good episode. I'm really happy with it. Hey, Robert, let me ask you real quick. If we do get a season 2, who do you think would make, like, who's on your list? I'm just curious.
So, there's 2 people on my list who I've already spoken to in this podcast. One is Mayhem Miller, Jason Miller, who exists in our series in the Nick Diaz episode, and somebody played him with the red thing in the Strikeforce brawl. But Mayhem is a fascinating guy. You can go back to him being an MTV star.
Yeah.
Early.
Bully Beatdown.
Yeah, Bully Beatdown was like an early offshoot of UFC, and it was a big show, and it was weird if you think about it. You're going to beat up your bully, or Mayhem's going to beat up your bully. And then he went through, he, of course, touches into this world already with the Strikeforce Brawl. He fought George St. Pierre. But he's had a lot of really dark challenges in his life, but he's doing great. And that's why I really like the story, because, like we said earlier, I feel like they work something. There's a beauty in somebody being on the good side of their story and being able to tell it. So, and also Mayhem's a fascinating guy. But also I spoke to Mark Coleman around the Pride episode, and Mark's got stories, right? He was just in a fire, like, and that's at this at this stage of his life after many challenges. So those 2 right there. I'm going to add one more. I got a list actually from people on X and stuff. But how about you guys? What are ones that you feel like you would? All 3 of us agreed Nick Diaz was going to be one that we just had to do our best to make it and tell the best story. What are ones that would be your season 2 version of that?
I mean, for me, and it's an example of kind of what I was referring to in terms of an episode that lays a foundation for another one. But obviously, we're all really happy with our Ultimate Fighter season 1 episode. And we kind of leave off with someone like Stephan Bonner after the finale. And we don't tell the rest of the story. But obviously, there's a dark and tragic story of how his kind of career evolved from there. And so it's something with the right cast and obviously the buy-in of people who are important to him that I think would be worthy of exploring down the line if it works out. As a guy who obviously deserves his flowers, even more so than we gave him in kind of that episode for his part of that fight. But definitely feel like that's one that is on the short list to explore, and we could definitely go very deep on him and, make sure he gets the respect he deserves. So, kind of like a Kimbo, someone who's no longer with us.
And among the reasons, like you said with Kimbo, among the reasons it's a great one is because people loved him, right? People loved Stephan Bonner, and there's a beauty in having people who loved you being able to tell your story, and there's a lot of people who loved him. How about you, Tim?
It's like, I know we try to avoid active fighters, which I completely understand. There's a few. I mean, I don't know what it is about the axe murderer, Wanderlei Silva, that I'm just so fascinated by that guy. I always have been. There's just something about him that I think he would make for a really fascinating story, especially about the early beginnings and kind of where he came from and what made him into the athlete that he became. I'm also I'm all about big characters. I think Tony Ferguson would make a great episode. I really do. And I mean, look, I know people have been texting me and emailing me almost like as a joke, but I do think there is some validity. I think a Conor McGregor episode would be really interesting.
Yeah. I know all 3 of those people to varying degrees. I think Wanderlei is a wonderful guy. Like, he's a teddy bear. And him telling his he's the world's kindest axe murderer. You know what I mean? Like, so he's an interesting one. Tony, I literally just spoke with him as he was being drafted by the GFL, where I was working the draft process. If you get him on board, and I think if Tony does watch the episodes we've done and sees the love with which we present them, he could be interested. And then Conor, I think if it were a particular chapter of his story, he would be most interested, my opinion. Conor versus Khabib, Connor and the bus, some specific thing, I think he might be interested. I also really would love to do something on Chael.
I almost said that.
Yeah.
Well, because he's so interlaced with Wanderlei too, right? With that, because of that, Ultimate Fighter most viral moment of I can't let you get close. Chael is just such a character, and I think he would be amazing.
Chael's a dear friend, and Chael would absolutely sit for us for a Wanderlei episode. I didn't call on him this year, but next, should there be a season 2, I 100% will ask him to contribute, and he's a very generous and he's a very good guy. But I just think a dark side of Chael Sonnen would be so fascinating if he were to sit and he would trust us after seeing the beauty with which we've presented season 1. I think he would tell his story, and he's had some ups and downs of his own. But if Chael tells it, there's no chance that you don't come out of it still loving him, because he's one of the most charming humans who's ever lived. So, but that would be fascinating. But Dave, you got more too. You got a list of 60 or 80, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one that would be an interesting episode to dive into, and something I only discovered as I really started, looking into what a season 1 could be, and didn't work out for that. But the story of something like Affliction FC, it could be really interesting to dive into as a very specific period of time. And, Donald Trump as the face of an MMA league based on a fashion line, and some of the stories that came out of that promotion, and it's, sort of this starburst of a life that it had, I think could be really interesting. That's
a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a really good idea, Dave.
Great idea. Tom Atencio is a good friend. He was the guy running it. So next time I talk to him, I'm going to tell him, hey, man, there's a great Dark Side episode here.
Yeah.
And see what and I know him, and I know what an enthusiastic guy he is. He'll agree, and he'll start telling me stories, and I'll say, if there's a season 2, save him. Don't tell me. Save him for the camera.
Yeah.
To your earlier point, Robin, I think a Conor Khabib would be great. Just the whole origin and everything surrounding that fight and the aftermath, and just the bad blood, that was there. And just, it's very interesting to see Islam, right? Like involved in that altercation, but you look at Islam then and Islam now, it's just the rise of Makhachev is just really, it's kind of staggering how far he's come so quickly.
Yeah, and there's a brawl after that fight with Dylan Dennis, who might sit for us. Islam I mean, when you tell a story like that, and if you talk to Khabib's guy, Ali Abdelaziz, and you say, we're going to speak your mind. Speak your mind. Tell how you feel. And the floor is yours. I think they would love to tell how they feel. And under that circumstance, Conor, tell how you feel about this scenario. That's a really beautiful one. Should there be a season 2, we'll start working, trying to see who's interested in that. I think Ali would be, because we would encourage him to speak his mind, and being able to. That's one of the beautiful things about the story is just tell us how you feel. This isn't narrative driven. You can tell us your story.
Well, and he got dragged into that whole thing. I mean, Conor was calling him out by name and disparaging him at press conferences. So absolutely, I mean, he not only as a manager, but also he's part of that story. He's wrapped up in it. Yeah.
Let me run by you a few that the internet has thrown my way. This one, I think probably both of you agree, and I'm sure it has come up many times. Phil Baroni.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, he puts the dark and dark side, right? For me, like, I was just, I thought Matt Serra is great in the interview chair, and he's so outspoken about Phil and his dislike for Phil. And when I saw him speaking about Phil and just kind of reading his body language and listening to what he had to say, I felt like, there's definitely something to mine here. But I mean, that's a dark, dark story, obviously.
Yeah.
What do you think, Dave?
Absolutely. I mean, it's another one where the War Machine episode that I guess is this whole Deeper Into the Cage is in regards to, it kind of lays the foundation. I mean, I hear about him in that episode and I want to learn more. And yeah, I think there's a way to use that episode to talk about the epidemic of CTE in the sport and use that as a microcosm to tell that story. And, how much did that play into what Phil is alleged to have done? So yeah, it's definitely one that's kind of on the short list for exploration. And I believe we were even in contact with his ex-wife, Angela, in regards to potentially sitting for War Machine, and for one reason or another, it didn't work out. But to get close to that story and kind of peel back another layer, absolutely, I think there's potential.
Here's one, may not have popped up, but they used to call him Crazy Horse. Now his nickname is Felony, Charles Bennett. Do you guys know Felony Charles? He fought Vanderlei Silva backstage. He's a fascinating guy. He's around. He's still fighting to this day. Used to do backflips off the cage. I've called bare knuckle fights of his as recently as last year. Charles Bennett's an interesting one. At Paquette 90 sent me that one, and that one's interesting.
He had that altercation backstage, right? Where didn't he choke somebody out? Like they were fighting.
Vanderlei choked him out.
Vanderlei choked him out. Yeah. I've seen that. Yeah.
They can sit for each other's episodes then when we do the
Exactly. Felony Charles, I was sitting. I was calling his fight with Frank Mir at Jorge Masvidal's Game Bred MMA, bare knuckle MMA, and Felony Charles is sitting there, and Frank Mir says to him, "Hey, Crazy Horse, something, something, something," and I said, "We don't call him Crazy Horse anymore. He doesn't stand for it. He gets really mad." I said, "We don't call him Crazy Horse anymore." I said, "You can call him Crazy Horse, but I'm not going to call him Crazy Horse." And Charles freaked out on me. He said, "Don't you tell him he can call me that." And I'm thinking, yeah, well, I mean, Frank's a heavyweight black belt. I'm a small 50-year-old who fought at the lowest level. It makes sense for you to be angry at me, but it's him who did it. But Felony Charles is a fascinating one, yeah. Other ones that have popped up that I didn't think of, Jens Pulver, which it would be epic. I'm like, Jens had some challenges in his life and is beloved. I'm not sure where, but I'll have to think about it. One that has come up 3 times, I never thought of. I don't know if you guys have. TJ Dillashaw.
Yeah, I mean, dude, every time I see a picture of TJ, he had shoulder surgery again. Yeah, like it's like this thing that goes on forever. Yeah, I mean, I think that has an interesting angle. Obviously, he paid a very heavy price, and you could say that he missed a good part of that prime, right? That window, because of what went down. So I think there's a real element of darkness there. And then, all the Garbrandt stuff, I loved the two of those guys. Yeah. Like there was really some great elements there, and the whole alpha male fallout.
Yeah. It's interesting stuff. For my money, if there was just an episode of some type or a documentary or something out in the world about steroids and fighting, TJ can be a large part of that, and that allows you to go into some really fascinating places.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, other ones that came up: Vitor Belfort, Cain Velasquez. Cain, of course, his life is still, that is still unfolding because he's being sentenced shortly. It's an interesting one too, because anyone who has kids, Tim, you have kids. I have. We'd shoot somebody. Maybe. Yeah. A lot of the world who saw that scenario is like, if someone harmed my child, I don't know what I would do. And you get 100 fathers, and a very large percentage of them say something. I have a friend, I'm not going to say who, a professional fighter, who said the only difference is it would be 5 years later and they would be in another country when it happened.
Yeah.
But
to your point, Robin, like a lot of people were sympathetic to Cain and kind of what he did, and then but then
allegedly
you get down to like the law's the law, right? So like when's it tolerated? you know, when you get right down to it, I mean, I think Kane could have had his way with that guy with his bare hands too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And I think he should have. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think. But, you know, emotion.
Absolutely.
We learn to control our emotions through martial arts, ideally, but there are limits to all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to thank both you guys. This process and this whole thing, it's been one of the most fulfilling things I've ever got to be involved in. And I know I'm sure you guys are in the exact same place, but so many people are just love the series so much, and so many of the subjects and the fighters. You know, Ian Daw, who was one of Evan Tanner's best friends, said that that's the best storytelling anyone's ever done on Evan, and to his knowledge, that's what Evan would love it. And things like that really are moving, you know. My friends, that is the end of the 10th podcast of Deeper Into the Cage, of the 10th episode of Dark Side of the Cage. This has honestly been one of the most enjoyable, thrilling, challenging, fun things I've ever worked on. Working on season 1 of Dark Side of the Cage with the brilliant people that we got to work with, it was honestly incredible. Honestly, a beautiful experience. A year of our lives we all spent working on this, and I hope people loved it. And then getting to do these episodes here with my friend Chase and with all our cool guests, George St. Pierre and Josh Barnett, and just countless awesome guests. It's been really, really fun. And thank you to everybody who's watched, and thank you to everybody who's shared it. Maybe there'll be a season 2 of Dark Side of the Cage, and if so, maybe there'll be a season 2 of Deeper Into the Cage. Thank you all for humoring me, and thank you all. If you're sitting here right now watching the end of this, then you are really the true consumer, and you deserve the most thanks of all. My name is Robin Black. It was a privilege to work on Dark Side of the Cage, and it was an extreme privilege to do these episodes of these podcasts, hanging and chatting with you. Until next time, enjoy the hostilities, my friends.
He was a savage.
He was arrogant.
He was a killer.
John embraced the role of War Machine.
In MMA, we don't prevent people from getting to this point.
Maybe I could have done something. I don't know. He had all the potential in the world.
And then, boom.
I got a phone call. John said I got arrested last night.
He's exactly where he belongs.
I hate the person that I was. I deserve prison, and I deserve hell even more.
Dark Side of the Cage, season finale, Wednesday at 10 on Vice.